Hi, everyone. I'm Frankie Baghdad here, one of the writing contributors, a Detroit mom, and I'm coming to you today to talk about getting ready for back to school. If you are raising an awesome neurodivergent child or two, some of you might not be familiar with that term. So, neurodivergent comes from this paradigm shift, this idea of neurodiversity, meaning there's diversity in all of us and how our brains work, process information, learn and experience life. And the concept about neurodiversity is that those of us who think differently, who have different neurotypes, are not less than, just different. So you're going to hear me use the term neurodivergent. I might also say disability or different type of learner. I use lots of different terms. And if you're not sure what would make somebody the most comfortable, I suggest you ask. All right, so let's talk about getting ready to go back to school. You guys may have those lists in front of you of suggested school supplies, and very often teachers will give very specific things like, I want 4 notebooks, 4 folders, and they're trying to help your child get organized. Now, those kids who really struggle with executive functioning, which includes organizing, breaking down big tasks, staying focused, all of those things that we need, time management, to get homework done and stay organized at school, may need a tweak to some of those school supplies. So if you're going to go sort of off list, I always suggest you shoot an email to the principal or someone at the school. You may not yet know who your teacher is, and just make sure it's okay. Or you might have a school that just gives a suggested supply list, and they're already a bit flexible in those terms. So I'm going to show you some pictures to give you a better idea of what I'm discussing. Okay, so even something as simple as picking out a notebook, you can make a small tweak that would have a big impact. So to the left, you see like what looks like a very typical one subject notebook. I love it because it doesn't look any different. But what I find is that it's wide ruled. That means there's some extra space between the lines. This is great for those kids who struggle with their handwriting, who have poor fine motor, small motor skills, and need extra space. This is really cool. I found this while I was looking around at Office Depot, and this is a pack of paper that already has this template on it for taking notes, where there's one big open-ended column, and then on the right, you can write notes. So the left could have a subject, like maybe we're talking about photosynthesis. On the right, here are the steps. So that is a technique for your older students if they have trouble with note taking. And you could maybe put those sheets in a folder or in a binder for them. Just one idea of how a small tweak in that school supply could make a big impact. I'm going to show you now some of my other favorites. And I'll mention that I'm not only a mom of 3, and my kids have lots of different learning styles. I also have a master's in special education and have spent decades working with those with ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, and other kinds of differences that may impact learning in a school environment. I also am a clinical social worker and talk to lots of kids through my therapy practice. So I'm sort of looking at things from both lenses: that teacher, what works for you managing the classroom, as a parent, and remembering my own struggles as a woman with ADHD back in the day when I was a full-time student. Okay, I love graph paper for math. It helps line up those columns as your child gets into beyond like 1-digit multiplication and division. So a lot of my kids' teachers ask for a graph paper notebook. And these look pretty much the same. But what I would suggest is either take your child with you so they can actually have their hands on things and see what works best, or bring a bunch of things home, hold on to that receipt so you can return things. Sometimes when we're looking at a binding that's not spiral, when you open it up on the desk, it closes. It doesn't stay open and flat on its own. And this can be really stressful because the kid has to use their like elbow to hold it down, write with another hand. And that could really kind of ruin someone's day. Also, a lot of these notebooks have like a perforated edge, so you could rip paper out and hand it in. And I remember as a kid, if I just gently tugged the page a little too hard, it would start to rip. So these are just the things I like to think about. Um, to the left, you see this paper. On one side is 4 inches. On the back is a 5 inch square. So again, you may need bigger space for children who don't have that really neat, delicate handwriting like myself. A little hack, if this is still too small, something I did as a teacher, grab a piece of graph paper, go somewhere where you can make copies, blow it up 200, 300%, make bigger graph paper, and then punch holes in it and maybe put it in a binder for them or in one of those like 3-prong folders, whatever works best. So even something as simple as a pocket folder, we can make those small tweaks. So I can picture in all my years in schools, and even now I'm school consulting, kids rushing from class to class, so nervous they're going to be late. A lot of teachers really don't like that. And I understand why. They need to start class and they can't like take that whole stack of paper, pat it down, get it all to fit in a little tiny square. So some folders you can actually pull like the folder piece out and help it stick in. Some you can't. This here is like an 8-pocket organizer. So all the folders are in one like spiral notebook. That's something to consider if your kid tends to lose track of things, but it still might not be the best fit. Sometimes I step out of the school supply aisle and go into like office supplies, what adults might do uh, to keep themselves organized, and that can be really helpful. I love a good accordion file, and the best thing about this one is its legal size, meaning it's wider than standard paper size, so there's a little more wiggle room if your child can't get that piece of paper in there perfectly straight. And see, as you open it, there's all those nice divisions, and they could write on each tab different subjects. If that is just too overwhelming during the day, they could have a system where all the papers they collect during the day go in one area. And then when they're in home in their own environment, they could file them appropriately. Or maybe that's something you do together. And it's okay to help your child because you're teaching them organizational skills. Pencil cases. Look at all the different kinds. So think about and talk to your child. Would it be best to have it in the binder so it's always with them? Or does that make the binder hard to close? Maybe something like this 5-star one where you open it up, it has lots of different divisions for different kinds of writing utensils. Here's one that's opened up, and I know my kids loved like having an area for red pens so they could pull that red pen out quickly. Pencils, all the different things teachers want. This one to the right I thought was really interesting. It stands up straight. So sometimes kids have really a small space that's their own. Maybe they're sitting at a table with other kids, not having their own desk. Or like in middle school, sometimes they have those teeny tiny desks that are attached to chairs and they don't have enough room to put out all their supplies and find things. And things are falling on the floor and they get really frustrated. And no wonder they're struggling with organization. So maybe having this little pouch that stands up could be helpful. Okay, if you have a child who's using a locker, this could even start in upper elementary. You might think, I'm going to just buy the normal, lock all the way over to the left. Well, not only do they have to remember a combination or remember where they wrote it down, but you have to turn it left and right and left. I have trouble with those myself. It's a lot to remember. And if you have a child who has short-term or working memory difficulties, which is very common with ADHD, it can just be too much, or those fine motor skills, or it's just an anxious kid and it's going to easily stress. So there are lots of locks that just have like 3 numbers that just have to line up, like the one next to it, or maybe letters and words are easier to remember. So I love the ones that just need a word all the way across. It may be a really great substitution to make their school life easier. And I know oftentimes in upper elementary, they just say no locks. And they're only keeping like books and things in the locker, that they're not so concerned in terms of like security. So definitely a few different options here for lockers. And my last page, I have to share, I just did this reel on Post-it notes and how much I love them and how they help me stay organized, and how working, in my therapy business and as an ADHD coach, I'm always talking about them. And guys, Post-it note responded. I felt like it was like a celebrity. So oftentimes you'll have like a stack of Post-it notes that are on your children's supply list. If it's okay with your school and your child's teacher, they have lots of different sizes that have lines on them. I have some like on my desk right now, and they're awesome for those of us like myself who would write all over and not be able to read it without the lines. I also love these flags. They have different materials. Some are easy to write on. Um, Beyond just writing that assignment down, and I can talk to you about the best ways I like to handle that. If your child still has like a textbook or a workbook, they could also put a little flag on the page that's supposed to be homework. And that is a great backup tool. So even if the plan is to write everything down in their planner, sometimes it's hard to read when they get home, or the planner might get forgotten at school, or they run out of time. Always great to have backup plans. So having that little flag on the workbook page can be a great backup plan. Some kids just can't write fast enough or neat enough, or really without just the stress to use a paper planner. And everything's digital nowadays. So maybe like a Google Doc planner would be a good setup for them. If you have an older child, of course, work with your school and their policies. But now in Michigan, we're just, gearing up to go back to school. And it's a great time to give your kid a little project they might enjoy. And they can get some free trials of some of the organization apps out there and see which one works for them, or find one that's totally free. You can even refine that process further by going on a great source like ADHD Online or chad.org. And they already have like apps they recommend, or other people with ADHD have recommended, or your favorite site to get autism information. So there are just some of my favorite tips and tools, little tweaks that can make a big impact in making going back to school a little easier for your neurodivergent child, and by extension for you as a parent.